Je vais parler de remote work privileges are already being peeled off. And we're barely out of COVID. Gosh darn, it feels good to be right, because I called this one like literally years ago. Yeah, XenPuck here. So way earlier during the pandemic, I think about a whole 2 years ago, okay, I railed against remote work somehow sticking around after the pandemic. So today, I mean, this clip is just really going to be me patting myself on the back because I love being right. I mean, who doesn't, right? The only difference is I commit my views to clips, so anyone can call me out on it, right? Which, strangely, I just realized makes me much more dignified than our last president. Good Lord, I hope he gets lost in the annals of history forever soon. Okay, tangent aside. So today, I'll give some concrete examples of how I can tell remote work is being chipped away at companies you'd probably want to work for, and most importantly, dive into the absurdity of work itself. Okay, so if you enjoy some random rants from a dude with no production skills, clearly, like, subscribe, share, comment, or whatever. I'll be great regardless, because I just do these for funsies. Okay, so point one, my main piece of evidence that prompted this clip is I know at least of one major well-known company that's already shifted its remote work perks towards the dumpster. Okay, so what it was, hey employees, you're allowed to remote work for, say, a pretty long period, like a month out of the year. Cool, awesome, that sounds, pretty decent, right? In reality, because that gives a person time to hang out for a ski season, or at least a good portion of it, or maybe enjoy the summer at a beach house or whatever. But now, okay, it's recently been changed to, you can remote work for a month or whatever out of the year, but only 1 week at a time. Okay, keep in mind this policy change happened within year one of the perk being introduced, since introduction. So do you see the trend here? Okay. I mean, by the way, the things are moving in another 3 months, they'll probably make it so that you can remote work for a month out of the year, right? As always, but only 1 day at a time. Because, making an entire duration down to a week means that you already cannot actually feel like you're really out of your home base for any real duration of time, right? And the whole eventuality where you're only allowed to work remote 1 day at a time, that's really only useful for handling the emergencies in life, isn't it? And at the basic level, that's the point why a big company is making this change, this type of change, right? They give you a new perk of remote working, not because of the reason their employees wanted, which is for living flexibility at a macro level, right? But because the employer can say, hey, technically you can work from home sometimes-ish now. Look at how kind we are. The employer gains almost nothing by letting employees work from home. And over time, as the economy shifts, workers lose even more leverage. Reversion to the status quo is just honestly to be expected. Okay, now point number two. Do the employers have a point? To be honest, I always say people can goof off. No matter where they're actually working from, right? Just because somebody's in the office doesn't mean that they can't be shopping for shoes or watching YouTube while at work. I personally have seen plenty of that happen in any of the offices that I've worked at. So why are employers so gung-ho about getting people back to the office? I would argue the primary reason is still to which degree a worker can goof off, right? When you talk about at home versus an office. For example, I've been I've been to a lot of offices, but have found it extremely very difficult, right, to take a nap at work without, people saying something. But where I can do that if I was working there? In my own apartment or house. Okay, the funny thing is, I'm not even saying that I would consider myself less efficient just because, I took a nap while during work hours, okay, remotely. That's hard for me to judge. But what I am saying is that the company that you work for would never be happy to hear that their workers are napping during office hours, right? Nobody could argue that point. So the real issue is really the illusion of control, right? Remote work will never be a thing so long as employers want to feel like they're in control of all of their troops. And employers will, of course, always want that. That's just human nature, right? Workers are really treated like children, right, in most workplaces. We all know it. I don't foresee that changing anytime soon. Now my last point, just a giant reminder, right? The tech, once again, I need to mention this again. The technology for remote work has been around for more than a decade before the pandemic, right? Okay? So this whole experiment about, whether people can, companies could simply stop renting offices has been tried before, well before the pandemic. And yet somehow all the major companies that tried it backpedaled everybody back in the office. Yeah. I mean, video conferencing tech, being able to send files to other people in a relatively short amount of time, none of these actual technologies is remotely new. So can a good amount of office workers do their actual jobs remotely? Of course. But companies will never let employees do that because they lose that whole semblance of control thing, right? The only reason remote work has been a hot topic was because, during the height of COVID, going to the office could have been dangerous, and workers gained some rarely, deserved, I would say, leverage, right? But as soon as the economy cools and workers lose the ability to switch jobs rapidly and still, get a raise or whatever, and that's happening right now as we speak, as tech layoffs has been happening, right? Of course, companies can just immediately rescind any perceived perks, like giving workers more freedom as to location, right? Why wouldn't they? They get nothing out of letting people work remotely, except for the idea of a happier workforce. But your boss isn't usually there to make you happy, is he? Right? Rather, you're there to make the company money. So yeah, perks that are unnecessary from the company's point of view, that is the first thing to go. Yeah. So in conclusion, I guess I shouldn't feel so giddy about being right on this one, mostly because I don't have to suffer through the office world anymore, right? But do you guys agree with me or no? Right? Maybe you work for a smaller outfit that's enlightened enough to know that having a much happier workforce in exchange for less control is actually worth it, right? But frankly, there will never be any or enough real data to confirm long-term trends as to how employee happiness can translate into, higher margins, so long as the big and powerful companies continue their traditional way of thinking, right? I mean, I'm not saying there's no circumstance that'll make remote work actually palatable to, corporations, but we would need some sort of pioneering startup to make it, to extraordinary moon-level heights before showing the dodgy old companies that profits can actually, be better, even if your workers can nap whenever they want. So, probably decades away from that scenario at the very least. If you know better, comment below or whatever. I love learning, okay? Till then, cheers. À la prochaine.